What's up, baseball fans, and of course, always, what's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Talking Mets with Rob with the first of the offseason MLB Hot Stove right here on the channel. So don't forget to hit on that like button if you're a new subscriber of the channel. Say what's up in the chat, guys, and let me know what fan you are, what team are you a fan of, and we will get started right away and talk all about what is going on in the world of baseball. If you watched MLB Network for the past 2 hours, that was their first MLB Hot Stove of the offseason on MLB Network. And I'm going to go over a couple of things they talked about, but there was a trade yesterday in regards to Mark Canha, former Met, who was traded to the Milwaukee Brewers during the trade deadline. And the Milwaukee Brewers have traded Mark Canha to the Detroit Tigers. So the first actual trade of the offseason and the hot stove is former Met Mark Canha to the Detroit Tigers from the Milwaukee Brewers. So a couple of things that they've talked about on MLB Hot Stove. One relates to the New York Mets and Pete Alonso. One relates to Juan Soto and the San Diego Padres. And also one player named Mike Trout that was talked about for the Los Angeles Angels. And then we're going to start, of course, with my team, with the Pete Alonso situation. And John Morosi was asked about the possible trade of Pete Alonso, if that is actually possible. He puts it at 50-50. And he put a couple of teams out there that was very interesting to me. We know about the Cubs and that situation, but he also talked about the Toronto Blue Jays and the Seattle Mariners, who are both looking for a bat to add to their lineup. And yes, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is their first baseman, but the Toronto Blue Jays would be looking at it, according to John Morosi, as a DH platoon situation with Vlad Guerrero to constantly have their bats in the lineup. So the Toronto Blue Jays and Seattle Mariners are two teams to watch for if the Mets are serious about trading Pete Alonso, which I don't believe they are at this moment, especially during the offseason, but maybe at the trade deadline if the Mets aren't playing well, which would be another disaster. The Cubs, I think, are going to try hard again in the offseason, this offseason, to try to acquire Pete Alonso, which I don't think the Mets are going to do, as I just said. But it is interesting that the Mariners and the Blue Jays are two teams that Morosi talked about on MLB Network to watch out for Pete Alonso if he becomes on the trade block again, which will be very interesting going forward during this offseason. The next one that we just talked about, Juan Soto. We know the financial restraints with San Diego Padres. They had to take out a $50 million loan to afford their payroll. So it's very likely, and a lot of assumptions, that Juan Soto is basically expendable on this team. Not saying that they want to Prella wants to get rid of Juan Soto, but if you can't afford payroll and you got to take out a loan, and the your payroll is very similar to what it was last year, if not a little bit more, if you want to make your team better, they're going to have to take out another loan. They can't afford it, especially with a bad season. And, they don't have a ton of season ticket holders, but they are a decent fan base, but they also have not won either. So they have a really big situation on their hands in San Diego. And teams that Morosi brought up was, number one, he brought up the Mets. He didn't even bring up the Yankees, because I think a lot of people believe, and again, if you're not reading the tea leaves here when it comes to the New York Yankees and what is going on, the Yankees don't like to give prospects up, especially when they could have traded for multiple players over the last couple of years to make their team better at that moment. I doubt they're going to trade their prospects now to get Juan Soto. And John Morosi was one who said that the Yankees are not there. And it's a pipe dream when it comes to the New York Yankees and Juan Soto. He fits perfectly on that team, in that ballpark, left-hander, obviously. But John Morosi brought up, again, the Cubs. He brought up the Mariners, and he brought up number one as the Mets. And again, I actually believe that because, again, you got David Stearns in here where he has no loyalty to anybody on this roster. He has no loyalty to any of these prospects. He didn't draft any of them. He didn't trade for any of these prospects. He obtained all these prospects and roster from the Billy Epler days, the Sandy Alderson days. So there's no emotional connection from David Stearns to any player on this Mets roster and any player in their farm system. So if the Mets do believe that Juan Soto is obtainable and is not going to, completely wipe out your farm system, because I think the Mets can do something else with those prospects in regards to pitching. But it is going to be very interesting to see, are the Mets going to go the trade route for a pitcher or a trade route for a big bat? Because either they're going to, now remember, the free agent pool for pitchers, there's a lot of them. Now, not at the top end caliber. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani would have been, but he's not pitching until 2025. Obviously, Yamamoto is the just been posted by his Japanese team. So the teams that are involved with Yamamoto, they're starting to be talk about. Obviously, the Yankees are heavily involved. The Mets are heavily involved. The Mets are, and this is a quote from a reporter. I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, I read it the other day. Oh, man, I forgot who the reporter is. I was reading it online, the article, that the Mets are enamored and flawed by Yamamoto. They are all in on Yamamoto. So the Mets, the Yankees, you heard rumors about the Mariners. You heard rumors about the Red Sox. You heard rumors about numerous teams that can afford that contract for that 25-year-old in Yamamoto. That is going to be an absolute target as well. And when it comes to other free agent pitchers, there's a lot of mid rotation guys. Nola, it's on the screen right there. Nola, Montgomery, Rodriguez, Snell. Guys like that are available on the market. Obviously, the trade market, that's on the bottom of your screen as well. Corbin Burns, Shane Bieber, Dylan Cease, Mitch Keller, Tyler Glasnow. So there's an abundance of pitchers that are available on the free agent market and abundance of players on the trade market. And you could look at the trade market where you could say that's probably more of a top of the line starter. Obviously, Yamamoto is key, is a guy that a lot of teams are going to see as a top line starter, but you don't know how he's going to perform in Major League Baseball. Just because Kodai Senga does it and Yamamoto has dominated the Japanese league doesn't mean he's going to do it in Major League Baseball. So no matter how good he might be, he's still a question mark. So to pencil him in as your number one, you could be playing with fire when it comes to Yoshinobu Yamamoto. But that doesn't mean that I don't want Yamamoto on the Mets. I do. So pitching is very, very high in demand every offseason. Every team always looks for more pitching. Clearly, my team, the Mets, clearly need at least 3 starters to fill up their rotation. If they're going to go that free agent or trade route, they need to revamp, a whole bullpen. And there's a lot of consideration and a lot of thought amongst Met fans that they need another bat. And that's why I says I believe David Stern is going to make one big trade. If the big trade is going to be a big bat or a big trade as a frontline starter. But it also depends with David Stearns if he's going to spend a lot of money on the free agent market pitching-wise. Like there's a lot of people saying, well, this is what he should do. Sign Yamamoto, sign Montgomery, sign Aaron Nola, and now you got Kodai Senga with Quintana and those 3 guys, and there's your rotation going into 2024 and beyond. Not a bad rotation, considering the way the playoffs looked and the way teams that basically had their number 1 starters having a 3.5 ERA, and I'm talking about the Phillies. Their best starter is Wheeler. That's their ace. He had a 3.5 ERA this year, yet they were 2 games away from making the World Series, and they made a run in the playoffs as well and made a World Series run last year. So you look at it that way. I think we're too focused. I think you need you need a number 1. You need a number 1. All right. You need a guy that is going to go out there every 5th day. And 9 out of 10 times, almost every time, you expect that pitcher to win. Again, obviously, things happen. Obviously, you're not going to win every single time. But you know what? How many years when Jacob deGrom came on the mound for the Mets, you knew he was going to give you a good performance. Yeah, the anomaly, once in a blue moon, he might get lit up every once in a blue moon. But other than that, you knew that you had a chance to win every single time. That's what a team needs. That's what the Mets need. But when it comes to 2 through 5, you need a guy to go out there. Like your second starter should be a guy that should give you a quality 6 inning, a really good 6 innings. Occasionally 7. Like Kodai Senga did, who got better over time throughout the season. And guys like Aaron Nola. I was very against Aaron Nola, and I'm going to be the first one to say that. But what he's shown me in the playoffs makes me want a guy like that, because I know he's not going to be your best starter or even your best 2 or 3 starters in your rotation during the season. But in the playoffs, if and when you get there, I feel confident that Aaron Nola is going to pitch well in the playoffs, because he had 1 bad start against the Diamondbacks this year in the playoffs. And if you look at his list in the last two postseason, he was one of the Phillies' best pitchers in the postseason. So I see it as this. And Jordan Montgomery actually performed well as well with the Texas Rangers, obviously a World Series champion now. So obviously you see the MLB Hot Stove top headlines right now. Where is Ohtani going to go? There's about 8 to 10 teams that have been talked about. Again, I still find that hard to believe there's that many teams, because there might be that many teams have a conversation with him and maybe sit him down. But there's probably maybe 5 teams at best that can put in that big contract offer and be able to afford it. So that's the way I see it. That's the way I see it when it comes to the Mets or any other team. The Dodgers, the Giants, the Mariners. Some people say the Yankees. I really doubt that. So that's where I am when it comes to Ohtani. Big time foreign free agents. There's a couple of them. There is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. There's Shada Imanaga, who is another Japanese starter that is highly regarded, not at the caliber of Yamamoto, but some believe that he can range around that Kodai Senga type, which is very interesting as well. Somebody who's going to lose out on Yamamoto might go after Imanaga. And the other guy that just popped up about 2 weeks ago he's on the list right over. I don't believe he's on the list. He's not on this list, but it's Yariel Rodriguez, who is a Cuban-born player who pitched the last 2 seasons, not in 2023, but pitched his last 2 seasons in Japan and was transitioned from a starter to a reliever. So a team that's been looking at Yariel Rodriguez is a team that says, okay, if you need him as a back end starter, you can use him. But if you need some help in the bullpen, which God forbid the Mets do need, you can use him in the bullpen as well, because he was transitioned in Japan from a starter. He pitched pretty well as a starter, but he was that much better as a reliever. In 2023, you saw him pitch with the Cuban team in the World Baseball Classic. That's the only time he pitched in 2023. So his arm is fresh, but that is something that he's probably going to need a little bit of work in spring training to get going again. But there's a guy you also can look at as well. Molan, yes. Jonathan India is another candidate that some people believe that the Reds are going to look to trade to acquire some assets back. Is going to be very interesting as well. Some people were talking about the Mets looking at Jonathan India to throwing him at second base, and maybe throwing McNeil to the outfield. That helps one of your corner outfield positions, and move Mauricio to third base. That's something that the Mets could do as well. That might be a middle of the road move that, is not a big time move, but Jonathan India is a good player, and he'll definitely be a good addition to the Mets roster as well. But I don't know if Jonathan India can play third base. I have to look at that, but we know he can play second base. So that's going to be very interesting. Yeah, Richard, I agree. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know 10 teams are going to be interested. Listen, 30 teams should be interested in Shohei Ohtani. But again, there's only a handful. There's no doubt in my mind that there's about 5 teams, maybe, that would go to that $500 million mark, no matter if it's 10 years or 11 years for Shohei Ohtani. We know the Mets are definitely one of them. Are the Dodgers going to go that far? We'll see. A lot of people believe they will. They didn't spend a lot last offseason basically preparing for this Shohei Ohtani free agency. So we'll see. Aaron, I know that's a funny comment with Stroman. He burned that bridge, and you know what? He's starting to burn that bridge with the Cubs as well. Again, he is a selfish player, and you've seen in the later part of the year, he struggled. And he's one of the big reasons why the Cubs basically fell apart down the stretch. A guy like Cody Bellinger, who was basically money for about 4.5 months, later in the season, he struggled a little bit along with Stroman and his injury. And the Cubs basically fell apart and didn't get a wildcard spot when they showed a lot of promise. So, once again, guys, welcome to MLB Hot Stove, this 1-hour show. Again, I'm gonna have multiple shows today. MLB Hot Stove 11 to 12, and then at 3 p.m. I'm going to have MLB Free Agent Frenzy. We're gonna talk more about all the top 20 free agents according to MLB.com, and of course other players that wasn't mentioned on that list. Obviously, there's a ton. There's only about 13 players that have been offered the qualifying offer. I'm going to go over that during that stream as well. And later tonight at 7 o'clock, we're going to do a Mets Hot Stove with a couple of guys from the Mets Roundtable podcast that we're going to go over a couple of the Mets needs, who the Mets should go after, who's their top 5 that they should go after, what trade targets to look at, and so on and so forth. So we'll get into that later in the show. But again, there's a whole list of headlines we got to look at. The big-time foreign free agents, we know Yamamoto, Imanaga, Rodriguez. Where will Shohei Ohtani sign? Again, 10 teams are reported to be interested. I said this earlier, 5 teams are probably willing to give that big payday. And Mets fan, any signings? Not yet, Mets fan, but thank you for the super chat. There was a trade. Mark Canha got traded from the Brewers to the Tigers. That's what it is so far. Aaron, I do appreciate the love, buddy. Thank you. Yeah, Daniel, the reason why Francisco Lindor didn't get the Gold Glove because Dansby Swanson's defensive metrics, ultimately were better, which, I didn't watch the Cubs every day, so I can't tell you how good Swanson was. I know he was a good defender with the Braves, but I do believe that Lindor got kind of screwed on that. Josh, that's interesting. Trade Juan Soto to Detroit. Listen, Detroit's got a lot of good young players coming up through the farm system that could be on the Tigers this year. They signed Baez last year. They're looking to do some. I think they're going to make some noise this year, the Detroit Tigers. That would be very interesting if the Detroit Tigers, they got enough prospects to do it, to trade for Juan Soto. And you know what? Detroit can make that big money move to sign Juan Soto, in my opinion. Fire blazing. I hope so too, buddy. I hope we get Yamamoto. Let me just. Any signings tonight, Mets fan? Probably not. It's again by the way, guys, the GM meetings are in Arizona today. The first day of the GM meetings and the first day of MLB Hot Stove as well. So that's when you're going to start hearing a couple of newsworthy reports in regards to possible trades, possible signings. This is the time when GMs start to talk about probably what they spoke about at the deadline. If deals didn't get done, with the whole situation with Juan Soto situation, was he actually getting traded? That is something that you also have to look at as well. The GMs are going to start talking to each other. So there's going to be some news that probably comes out over the coming days during those meetings with all those baseball reporters in Arizona, because the Arizona Fall League just ended as well. So, Ethan, the winter meetings are going to be interesting. Those are in the first week of December. I believe it's the 3rd through the 5th, if I'm not mistaken. I'll give that date at a later time, but I know it's early in September. So that's where we are with that. So the lack of big bats, that's another headline that is talked about throughout baseball. The lack of big bats in free agency. That's why Juan Soto is very, very important to this overall offseason. I do believe he's going to get traded. According to John Morosi, he's given 50-50 that Juan Soto will get traded. So that is actually something that you're going to be looking for throughout the season and throughout the offseason. And I think a lot's going to happen this winter meetings. The last couple of winter meetings, it was kind of slow. I think it was 2019 where, there was a ton of big names that signed, a couple of big trades. So that's something that's going to be very interesting. Yes, Mike Lewis, Eduardo Rodriguez did opt out to his contract with the Tigers. So he is a free agent. This is a guy that I want the Mets to get. I think he's one of the guys that you could put in as your number 3. And, I think he's a solid number 2. But you could slot him in as the number 3, especially if the Mets get Yamamoto. And if you got Yamamoto, Senga, Rodriguez, and Quintana, that's a pretty damn good number 1 through 4. And then your number 5, if you want to throw a guy like Aaron Nola, or maybe even, if you go into, sign a back end of rotation guy, or you give the guys in your farm system a chance. Mike Vazo, maybe you give Peterson, McGill, Lucchesi, one of those guys another chance to get in the number 5 spot and make them fight it out. We'll see. Robert, thank you. December 4th to the 7th. I know it was something in the first week of December. Excuse me. All right, so the Big Apple disasters. The Mets and the Yankees did not make the playoffs. The Yankees were a game over 500. To end the season, the Mets had 75 wins. Both didn't make the playoffs. Both were a disaster. The Mets actually made a decision and ate up a lot of the money to get back a ton of prospects in Gilbert, Acuna Jr., Clifford, a couple of lower-level minor league prospects from the Marlins for David Robinson. They basically jumped their farm system to the middle of the pack in 2022 before the trade deadline, which was around 14th, 15th, and 16th, depending on what list you look at, to definitely a top 10, and in some lists, a top 5 or 6. And that's a big deal, because when people the problem with a lot of the Mets fans, and I go back to a lot of my streams arguing with a lot of Mets fans, how a lot of Mets fans were not happy that the Mets basically gave up on the season. even though nobody wanted to blame the players in June, was a big reason why the Mets made this decision. The Mets made this decision because what this did by acquiring all these prospects, it gives the Mets options this offseason. Not only could they use some of these acquired or these prospects in your farm system to make a trade, and not saying if the Mets decide to not make a trade this offseason and sign players to make up this roster, they got a ton of prospects they can use at the deadline if they need certain players. That's why that's so important. It gives David Stearns options. If David Stearns doesn't like a price for a certain player, let's say if let me give a name, right? Let's say he's really after Eduardo Rodriguez, right? And Rodriguez is getting a lot more money and a lot more years than he thought he was going to get, and doesn't feel comfortable with that number. Maybe he'll say, all right, you know what? Maybe I can use a prospect, a high level, a top 10 prospect, and another lower level prospect to acquire a guy like Shane Bieber or Corbin Burns or Dylan Cease or Glasnow or Mitch Keller, right? And that's something that I think that where David Stearns is in a very good spot. He has a lot of work to do, no doubt. But to definitely have options is a big deal. When it comes to the Big Apple disasters in the Bronx with the Yankees, it's basically Aaron Judge, and that's it. There's some speculation that Gleyber Torres could be a trade target to get back a pitcher that can help this rotation with the Yankees. Garrett Cole's probably going to win, most likely win the Cy Young. So who can you trust? Michael King is a guy that they put in the rotation late in the year because of necessity, and he performed well. But he's also a guy that never pitched a lot of innings. And if you're going to require or count on a guy like King to pitch 150, 160 innings, you got a rude awakening, because once Nestor Cortez pitched those amount of innings, look what happened the following year. He was constantly injured and couldn't help the rotation. When he starts, he pitches well. But in Michael King's situation, he couldn't pitch back-to-back after his injury in 2022, excuse me. And now they expect him to throw 140, 150 innings, and you're trying to make the playoffs. That's a problem. So are the Yankees going to look out? We know the Yankees are going to be looking at Yamamoto. I don't think they're going to outspend the Mets on Yamamoto. So unless they're going to go way over the market, somehow, some way, Cohen says, all right, $230 million for 6-7 years for Yamamoto that's all I'm going. And the Yankees give an extra year and give more money. Well, that basically doesn't solve the main issue with the New York Yankees. What is it? It is offense. You saw what happened when Aaron Judge went down. They look like a minor league team. And I can't stand the Yankees, but it's not like it wasn't a fact. They had nobody else to step up. Now, if Anthony Rizzo didn't have that concussion issue, maybe he could have, put the team on his back. But he was bad. Everybody else was bad. Gleyber Torres was the Yankees' best hitter, and Yankee fans are looking to get rid of him. So, the Yankees have a lot of work to do, but I don't believe they're going to do as much as people think they're going to do. I don't think they're going to have enough to trade Juan Soto. The Yankee prospects are always overhyped. They've been like that for years. And, look at the disaster of all the prospects they brought up over the last 3-4 years, 5 years. And a lot of them are bust. Some of them are out of baseball. Some of them are hanging around on the minor leagues, and they're not very good. And it just shows you that if you're going to go, and a lot of, what Met fans were talking about, a whole lot of the situation with the Mets, you got to get younger. You got to use your prospects. Well, there's only 8 positions on the field that you can fill. At the moment, 4 is your core 4. Alonso, McNeil, Nimmo, Lindor, right? If you believe your catcher is Francisco Alvarez, catcher is out. Third base is a question mark for the most part, but you do have Beatty and Mauricio. If you want to go that route, whichever one you want to choose, be my guest. I'm okay with. Now, your corner outfield position is Gilbert, who you got for Verlander. Is he going to be an option for a corner outfield position? Is he going to be able to get a chance to make the team? Or are the Mets going to go a Cody Bellinger route? It's going to be very interesting what they do. But when it comes back to the Yankees, I think teams are finding out now that Yankee prospects, for the most part, are overhyped, and they're not going to get fooled again. They got fooled a couple of times over the years. I don't see that. I think that's why the Yankees and Brian Cashman couldn't make a trade at the deadline. And, all the excuses I heard was, oh, well, they weren't looking to acquire. Well, what were they trying to do? Because Cashman, a week before the deadline, saying we're all in. So if you make no deals at the deadline to help your team, then you weren't all in. I think the problem was Brian Cashman was trying to make trades and trying to get over on certain GMs and teams, and they know his game now. And I think that's what ended up being a problem. Josh, wow, Matt Chapman to the Tigers would be very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, Fire Blazing, I understand that, but there's only so many spots, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got Mauricio, Vientos, and Beatty, who are basically technically third baseman. Yeah, Vientos can play a little bit of first base and obviously DH, but all these guys can't be all of them can't play. So some of these kids are going to be sitting on the bench. That's not what you want to do with these guys. Right? None of them can play the outfield. Mauricio was a failed experiment in the outfield. Maybe Brett Beatty, who's played left field in the minor leagues, maybe the Mets give him the opportunity when spring training comes around to play left field and see if he can perform there. But then you worry about his bat. He hasn't shown enough offensively. So the Mets have a ton of prospects, a ton of players that all can't fit on a roster. And I'm not saying to trade, 7 out of your 10 top prospects to get everybody you need. But in my opinion, there will be a big trade for a pitcher or a bat. Whatever they decide is the better route to go, either spending money to get a bat in free agency or trading for a bat. A big-time bat. Now, if the Mets get Shohei Ohtani, that kind of solves that bat need, right? But you also have to look at it in another way. I think the Mets are going to go pretty hard in free agency pitching-wise and bullpen, starting pitching and bullpen-wise. Because you're not trying to sign a 38, 39, 40-year-old anymore. You're getting guys that are, some of them might be 28, 29, 30, 31, where you could say, okay, no problem. So I don't mind spending money on guys like Yamamoto, who's 25 years old. Eduardo Rodriguez, I think, is 31 in the start of the season. Aaron Nola is 30. John Montgomery, I think, is 29. So I'm not worried about how many years and money you're going to give. You expect those guys to give you, what they've shown over the 5 or 6 year period if they stay healthy. Michael, how you doing? So that's where I see it as. So when it comes to the Big Apple disasters that are the New York Mets and the New York Yankees, both have a lot of work to do. But I do feel confident that the Mets, what they need, they can get via free agency because of Steve Cohen's pockets and trades because they acquired all them extra prospects at the deadline, making their farm system and some of those prospects expendable, right? What are you doing with Kevin Parada? He's the top-rated catcher in the minor leagues. You don't think he's going to be sought after? What are the Mets going to do with him if they believe Francisco Alvarez is their future catcher for the next 10 years? There was some speculation that they're going to try Kevin Parada out at first base. Is that a scenario if they don't sign Pete Alonso? It's going to be very interesting. So the Big Apple disasters have a lot of work to do this offseason. So we talked about the San Diego Padres payroll issues. It has become a big issue. There was a report that came out. They had to take out a $50 million loan to pay their players with their massive payroll. It's a problem in San Diego. You know, I hardly doubt they're going to take out more loans to pay a payroll that's probably going to have to be higher if they continue to buy and add players and add payroll to make the playoffs, which they failed to do. So that's going to be interesting with the San Diego Padres, why I think Juan Soto is going to be traded. A little bit of a relief on that payroll with Preller and the San Diego Padres. Red Sox ready to pounce, right? Over the last week or so, you heard that they're going to be in on Shohei Ohtani. They're in on Yamamoto. They're going to be in on other players as well. Specifically, they're going to be looking at the pitching market as well. Cody Bellinger was spoken about on Boston's radio network. WEEI was talking about Cody Bellinger as well. I think the Red Sox are going to be one of those dark horses this offseason that are going to make that are going to probably be a winner in this offseason, in my opinion. So watch out for the Red Sox and make some big moves this offseason. And my kitty cat Shay is making an appearance. Hey, buddy. Sorry. Oh, careful. You're going to fall. He likes his little spot on the desk. Yeah, that's my cat Shay. It's my buddy right there. You finally done sleeping? All right, guys. I'm sorry about that. Dodgers going big. Obviously, the talk is the Dodgers were not spending the last offseason to save money for Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, that is the easy choice, the easy place that he can probably go. And I think Shay's going to block the camera. Of course he is. Okay. Give me a second, guys. And he's showing everybody his butt. All right. He went to his little nest over there. All right. Sorry, guys. Shay had to make an appearance. He likes the camera. So I think the Dodgers are going to try their very, very, very best. And I think, obviously, they have in their favor the West Coast. And they could spend a lot of money and offer that big contract. So obviously the Dodgers are going to be one of the favorites, right? The Giants are starting to be talked about now. The Mariners, we all know about the All-Star game, how they were chanting, come to Seattle, to Shohei Ohtani at the All-Star game. You know, Seattle, the Giants, the Dodgers. I mean, the Rangers were even talked about. Any team that can afford them on the West Coast is going to be watched a lot. But I still believe that if Steve Cohen wants a player, he's going to give the most money. Now, that doesn't say that Shohei Ohtani wants to come to the East Coast. But take this in for a factor. Okay? The players, the owners went on strike because of all the issues that was going on when they missed a few games of the season and started a little later, right? What was the big deal about that? It was about teams didn't want to spend so much money on players that technically didn't deserve it. Basically, you're paying for what they did and not what they're going to do. And players are like, well, the market's going up. Everything's going up. Inflation's going up. They were talking about why couldn't we get paid for what we already did and, you know, what we bring to the table. And we are the face of Major League Baseball, right? Don't think for a second that this doesn't matter. You don't think the union and the player union reps on other teams are not in the agent's ears and Shohei Ohtani's ears about making sure he takes the biggest deal? Because if you're the best player in baseball and you're a free agent, which Shohei Ohtani is, right? He is the face of Major League Baseball right now. If he takes less money because he likes the West Coast, that is going to go very badly and not going to make the players union happy. And a lot of the players around baseball not happy because a lot of people and a lot of the players in the union weren't happy that Aaron Judge took less money to go back to the Yankees because the Giants offered more And the Padres were speculated to offer $400 million. And he went back to the Yankees because the Yankees were finally going to give that extra year that the Giants were offering. The union was not happy. A lot of the players around the league were not happy about it. The reason why it wasn't talked about enough was because there wasn't a lot of big outfield talent in the free agent market that hurt other free agent outfielders, right? Brandon Nimmo was basically the second best outfielder on the market other than Aaron Judge. And there's no doubt that Aaron Judge helped Brandon Nimmo along. But if there was like 4, 5, or 6 pretty good to top level outfielders available, that would have hurt those other players. So remember this when thinking about Shohei Ohtani. There's going to be a ton of pressure on him to take the most money because there's nothing more than most owners want in Major League Baseball than a player taking less money, because all that's going to do, because you know what happens? The lower pitchers are going to be waiting for the Shohei Ohtanis and the Yamamotos to sign, so they have a line of, all right, this is how much they get paid, so I'm on that third level. So this is where I'm probably going to be looking at to get paid. So if Shohei Ohtani, say if he really wants to go to the Dodgers, there's no doubt in his mind, but the Dodgers offer $420 million over 10 years. But the Mets come in 10 years, $500 million. That's an $80 million difference. That is a lot of money that is being left on the table to go somewhere that he's going. So don't think for a second there isn't a ton of pressure from the union for Shohei Ohtani to take the most money. And you know who knows that? The business sense of a mind in Steve Cohen. He knows that. He was in the room when the union, the players union, and the MLB owners and executives were in the room talking when they were going through their issues with the strike and the pause of the season because of financial situations. He knows that the union is going to put a ton of pressure on Shohei Ohtani. Steve Cohen's going to make the biggest offer if he really wants Shohei Ohtani, which a lot believe he's going to want him. So if he takes less, it's going to hurt the other players in his position. Because if the Dodgers get him, that means guys like Yamamoto, that means guys at the next level, the Blake Snells, right, that could have possibly went to the Dodgers, that could have possibly went to other teams, are going to be like, damn, he took less money. Why am I going to give Blake Snell $240 million? That's crazy. Look, Shohei Ohtani took less money. You're not better than Shohei Ohtani. You need to take less. And then it's going to be a trickle-down effect through the other pitchers at different tiers of quality. That's where we are. Yeah, but Matthew, I understand your point when it comes to trading prospects, but the Mets have too many. You don't have that many spots available for all these prospects. Right? What David Stearns has to do is choose the ones he believes can help this team in the present and the future. I understand that, but you always can't, you can't make any moves if you're always worried about an injury. If you're always worried about injuries, then you're never going to make a big signing. You're never going to make any type of big move to help your major league roster. I'm sorry, but look at these world champions over the last couple of years. They've used their prospects over the last couple of years to get the players that were needed on this team to help them make a World Series run, and in some cases win a World Series. Sometimes you have to make those trades. The big problem with the Mets in 2022 was they did not go all in, and it burned them. It hurt them going forward because they didn't make one of the best teams in baseball better in 2022 by not giving up. Even though they had limited prospects, they could have still done that. Okay, but we have a lot of high prospects. You know, we have 97 shortstops that can play multiple positions around the infield. We have more infielders than we can throw around. We can start a new team with the infielders we have. So if McNeil gets hurt, one of your infielders can pop right in, one of your prospects, a Mauricio, a Beatty, a Vientos, right, and move guys around. Luis Angel Acuna. We got a lot of them, right? If you get outfield, which the Mets now have multiple prospects now, Alex Ramirez, Gilbert, Clifford. Now, Clifford and Ramirez are probably not ready yet, but Gilbert is. But you have to understand it this way. And I understand your argument, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but on to be the devil's advocate here, at some point, you're going to have to make a decision on some of these prospects because you're going to end up like the Yankees. Let's not trade out top prospects because we want all of them to work out and be a part of this team. But when that big trade happens that can actually help this team in the present and you don't do it, and then you fall short of your goal, who's to blame? So you're going to be excited that you're keeping your prospects who most of the time, there's a 7. Now, when you look at the Atlanta Braves, that's an anomaly. Almost every one of their top prospects worked out. The Arizona Diamondbacks, they had a couple of prospects that worked out. But that's one season for the Diamondbacks. For the Braves, it just worked out that way. But that doesn't happen often. So to go that route is a dangerous game to play. Because what the Mets did over the last 2 years, Matthew, you should have been happy with. They kept all their prospects and they spent a ton of money. That's what you want to do. It clearly didn't work. Because what they did was spend money, but when they needed that extra player, like in 2022, they spent a ton of money to acquire basically an entire outfield, right? And, get Eduardo Escobar, get a couple of other guys, and it worked out. Trading, right? We used a couple of prospects to get Bassett, right? That was a big deal at the time. You have to look at it in that situation. The New York Mets, David Stearns, and again, David Stearns didn't trade for these guys. He didn't draft these guys. He didn't sign or draft any of these guys on the roster. So he has no connection to them. If he thinks that these guys are better off in a trade package, you got to trust him. You got to do it. I'm sorry. I don't know what Gilbert or Alex Ramirez or Kevin Parada or name me Jet Williams, any top 10 prospect, any of them. You can't tell me that any one of those guys are going to be better than Juan Soto. So you're not going to trade for Juan Soto because, if there's an injury? Well, what if there's no injuries and you're playing well, but you still need that extra bat? And that prospect is probably not going to be that because it's rare that happens. On Fireblaze, I said that for years. Yeah, I like Jet Williams as well. And I think that's the reason why. But you're going to have to package Jeff McNeil in probably like a Juan Soto trade because the Padres are looking for at least one major league ready guy, major league player on a roster that they can just fit in. And McNeil can play right field if need be, right? Maybe they want to move Tatis back to the infield. That could be interesting as well. So, yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think Jet. You heard the interview with Jet Williams that he said that he expects to be in the major leagues this season. Like that's how confident this kid is, and he's raked in the minors. And you know what? Who also said that? Francisco Alvarez, in the 2022 spring training, that he's going to be on the team again. An injury kind of forced that issue with Alvarez. It wasn't really him playing well because he wasn't playing well in the minors, but the Mets had no other choice. Well, Jay, that's what I was saying, right? The Mets had an opportunity to use the little top prospects they had because nothing is given. Nothing is guaranteed. The following year or the future is never guaranteed. So to work your way towards a future when you have one of the best teams in baseball is a detriment, and he should have been fired on the spot. Now, I think Epler, along with Cohen, did an excellent job this deadline to acquire all these prospects. That's a fireable offense. Why you couldn't get – I'm sorry. Everybody should have been expendable besides Francisco Alvarez. Everybody else what should have been able to be used in a trade to get what you needed at the deadline in 2022 because that team was that good, right? The Marte went down with an injury. The Mets could not replace that production, and they couldn't do it in the farm system either. Even though some people are like, why didn't you bring these guys up? They weren't ready, right? I don't believe Beatty, Alvarez, Mauricio would have helped right away with the production that Marte was given. The Mets in September scored a full run less than their overall season. That was a big problem. Council decision today. Martino said it. Cool. Good. Another stream that I have to do. So once again, guys, MLB Hot Stove here for the next 10 minutes. This is an hour show. I'll be back at 3 o'clock with MLB Free Agent Frenzy to go over the free agents, the teams that are going to be looking at certain players, going to be looking at all types of international free agents as well, and talking more about contracts and what could we be looking at for certain free agent players during the MLB Free Agent Frenzy day 1 of that stream. And later tonight, a couple of boys from the Mets Roundtable podcast are going to join me on Mets Hot Stove Live. First day of Mets Hot Stove Live, and we're going to talk about the manager situation. Dolph Met just said that according to Martino, Council is going to make a decision today, which would be nice because I want to know my manager, and I think some players would like to know the manager. I still believe it's going to be Carlos Mendoza. I don't think Craig Counsell has the balls, to be quite honest, to come to New York and deal with New York and be productive as a manager. I think he is a Midwest, middle of the country guy. Why I think he's weighing over the Guardians manager position as well, as long as going back to Milwaukee. Because I believe that if the Mets clearly are giving him the most money, right? That's why the report came out that he wants around $7 million, and clearly the Mets probably are around that. But there was also a report that if the Brewers match it or the Guardians match it, he's either going to stay in Milwaukee or go to Cleveland. So that's where I am when it comes to Counsell. I don't think he's all in here. And that's a problem already going into the season. With a manager that didn't actually want to be here, but nobody matched what the Mets gave, and he came to the Mets. Carlos Mendoza, on the other hand, a guy who's been experienced in dugout, has been a bench coach with the Yankees for the last couple of years. He is a guy who deals with the defensive alignments, deals with the defensive aspect of the Yankees, and the Yankees actually have been better defensively over the last, especially this year, when Mendoza actually took over that situation. With the situation with Carlos Mendoza, and I said this numerous times on multiple streams, over multiple videos, multiple live streams, I want a guy who's been in the dugout. I don't want a guy who is a former player who's never been in the dugout, who might be an analyst on some network, or a guy who is just an advisor in the executive office. That's a dangerous game to play because you don't know how he's going to perform. Specifically, Carlos Beltran. Just because he's one of the better players in Mets history, and we all think he's a great baseball mind, doesn't mean he's going to be a great in-game manager or can manage the players or, most importantly, manage the New York media. I've seen Carlos Mendoza, when Aaron Boone gets thrown out every single day, take over a lineup, take over the baseball situations and decisions, talk to the media when Aaron Boone wasn't available because he got thrown out of the game. That's where I say, okay, Carlos Mendoza is not a terrible choice. Clearly, Carlos Mendoza won over David Stearns in the interview. So something David Stearns, who clearly is going to favor Craig Counsell to be his manager, if he believes Carlos Mendoza is the guy he can work with, I have no problem with that. So we'll see. All right, so the Orioles, they need to make a big splash. I think they did a terrible job at the deadline, and you saw what hurt them in the playoffs. They could not pitch. They needed a starter. They needed a big-time starter that can help that rotation. They were able to hit. They could not pitch. Watch the Orioles to make some good big splashes pitching wise to help their rotation with their really, really good lineup going forward in the AL East, who was the AL East champs last season. Trade market could be key for teams. Obviously, we talked about the trade market already. I think this offseason is going to be trade heavy because I think there's a lot of teams that are looking to try to shed payroll. I think there's some teams that don't care about payroll, and we know who they are. We've seen it over the last couple of years. I truly believe this is going to be the offseason of big trades because there's a ton of pitchers on the market that could be traded. There's a couple of guys that could be traded bat-wise. The White Sox might be going through a fire sale. There's a couple of guys. Tim Anderson is a free agent now. The White Sox didn't pick up his option, so he's a free agent. He's a guy that I think needs a change of scenery. He's another guy. I do believe this is going to be the offseason of trades. And the GM meetings, which start today in Arizona, is going to start that process. Because a lot of the trades that did not happen, that were spoken about between GMs during the trade deadline, are going to get rehashed again during these GM meetings. So you're going to hear a lot of news over the next couple of days about this. And according to Matt, I forgot who said it, that Dolphman, who said it in the chat, that Martino just said that Craig Counsell should be making the decision today. So maybe I'll pop on with a breaking news story that Counsell is or is not going to be the next manager of the New York Mets. So, guys, MLB Hot Stove is ready to go. Hopefully, your team gets what they need. In my case, I hope the Mets do what they have to do to put their rotation together, get that bullpen in order, and maybe acquire that big bat they've been lacking in this lineup to help Lindor and Alonso going into 2024. We'll see who the manager is going to be, and hopefully today or tomorrow. That's what we got so far, guys. I'll see you at 3 p.m. MLB Free Agent Frenzy, day 1 on the channel. All about the top 20 MLB prospects according to MLB.com. We're going to talk about all of those players. We're going to talk about contracts. What could they look like for certain players? And whatever questions you got, guys, make sure you tune in to 3 p.m. for MLB Free Agent Frenzy right here on the channel. Hit on that like button if you haven't already, and make sure to subscribe and hit on that notification button so you get notified when I go live and when I post my videos, guys. With that said, MLB Hot Stove, day 1 in the books. See you in a couple of hours, guys. As always, baseball fans, MLB offseason is going to be fun for all my Mets fans. Let's go, Mets. I'll see you later today, guys. Have a good day.